The gold flows around the world is telling you who's worried. And you got everybody worried about Europe right now, and that's why you got all that moving from Europe to the US. If you look at history, tariff wars precede hot wars. And you've got financial and tariff wars that lead into hot wars. So what are you going to see? You're going to see more wars kick off. Let's go back to his first administration. When FASB 56 was signed off on, and he knew about it as an administrative accounting rule, which meant the government can take dark its finances. Well, how they take it dark? Well, they can spend more than they say, and you can spend for housing and urban development in defense, or you can spend for defense in health. You never know what the government's spending money on. And there was $21 trillion of missing money from the Department of Defense and Housing and Urban Development. What he's going to do is use the first couple of years of his presidency to clean stuff out. But what people aren't paying attention to is that he's not cleaning everything out, is he? There's all this missing 21 trillion, which if you extend that to the rest of the government, some people think it could be 100 trillion. What he's going to do is use the first couple of years of his presidency to clean stuff out. But what people aren't paying attention to is that he's not cleaning everything out, is he? There's all this missing 21 trillion, which if you extend that to the rest of the government.
You're watching Capital Cause, and my name is Danny, and today's guest is fan favorite Rob Kientz. Rob, thank you so much for coming on, my friend.
Thanks for having me again. I appreciate you.
Yeah, let's just dive right in, Rob. It is Monday, March 10th, and the market is, I don't want to say crashing, but it's correcting significantly right now. That we were talking about off air. The NASDAQ is down 3% recording. The Dow is down almost 2%. What do you make of what's currently going on out there? What's your most topical story on your radar screen at the moment?
Well, I think it's affected by a lot of things. We're seeing recession, and by recession, I don't mean officially announced government recessions, but I mean less stuff being bought around the world. Consumer credit here in the US has been fluctuating. People were paying off their credit now, and they're buying less. A lot of the goods purchases have come down. The trade wars and the tariffs are affecting things. And this is something I warned people about as soon as Trump got elected. And I might have come on your show. I think I did come on your show and have a big episode on that. When you threaten tariffs, in the long term, it's very damaging to economies. In the short term, it's kind of like the art of the deal. Why Trump's administration likes it so much, because it's like playing poker. You can win a hand, but you may lose the battle. You may, or win a battle, lose the war type of deal. Yeah, and I think what's happening is tariffs are just screwing around with financial flows and product flows. And you also got the threat of war in Europe with the whole NATO-Russia thing. You've got the defense spending ramping up. But a lot of that defense spending ramping up, a lot of people like Martin Armstrong and others have come out and said, Europe is crashing right now. Even though they're not officially reporting it through the governments, the economies are crashing. And the euro is the third largest economic bloc in the world behind the US and China. It's huge. And not only do you have the production coming out of places like Germany, you've got a lot of buying, and you've had things severed like Brexit severed. And so you've got the world in this sort of state of flux economically. And that's why you're seeing this gold rush where the LBMA is like 6 to 8 weeks out from delivering, and they're slotting. And you got the guy from the Bank of England saying, we got a lorry in the yard, which is a truck. I got a truck in the yard, and that's preventing us from getting the gold out, which is absurd. And you got, the COMEX is filling up with all this gold and silver because people are panicking about what's going on in Europe. So they're bringing it over here to be safe. So I think people are responding to that. And the gold trade, not the gold price, the gold flows around the world is telling you who's worried. And you got everybody worried about Europe right now. And that's why you got all that moving from Europe to the US. But it's this game of musical chairs where people look at these economies going, man, if I sit down, am I going to have a chair? Am I going to have the gold and silver? It's Basel III and Basel IV saying gold's a high quality liquid asset, and the dollar maybe not so much anymore. It's all of these things we've been talking about for 4 or 5 years sort of coalescing at the same time. So you're looking at the first stages of the free fall, and that's reflected in the stock market. People are not valuing the stocks as much because they look at what's going on in the economy. They look at the almost seeming panic from the administration doing these Bitcoin and gold sovereign wealth fund type of deals. I mean, it's clear that the government right now is panicking around spend. They're panicking around capital flows. You had the worst current account balance, monthly current account balance, meaning we sent more out than we got in on record. It was either last month or the month before. So we're sending more out, getting less in, and we're panicking. Europe is in a state of a mess financially. China's got their problems. We're seeing the start of this global deflationary collapse. We're not fully into it, but we're seeing it.
And you're starting to see the trade war escalate worldwide. It's not just between the U.S. and XYZ country. You also have China putting tariffs now on Canada. So, I mean, this thing is spread.
And if you look at history, tariff wars precede hot wars. You've got financial and tariff wars that lead into hot wars. So what are you going to see? You're going to see more wars kick off. Hopefully we won't get to the big one. I don't want to predict that. I'm not going to speak it. I'm going to say, hopefully that does not happen, but you'll see more regional wars kicking off. You see it in Syria. You see it in the Middle East. You see it in Europe. You're starting to see China make, China basically said Taiwan's part of our family and families don't leave each other, basically saying, Taiwan, you're with us. Are they going to invade? Are they just going to, are they going to try to control it economically, which is what China's trying to do? You see this geopolitical realignment in addition to an economic realignment, and now a gold realignment. And that usually precedes big conflagrations, whether it be economic issues, war, all that kind of stuff. Oh, and the Romania, look at what happened in Romania. You had an election in Romania that supposedly was legit, and the courts came out and said, oh, it's not legit because we don't like these guys. He's right wing. So now they've arrested that guy. You've got mass protests in the street in Romania because they're like, you just canceled a legitimate election. Like how many times is it a good thing for a country or that region of the country or of that region of the continent when you cancel a legitimate election? Like, when does that ever lead to good things? You just got this financial dislocation leading to political dislocation, and it's a mess. The world's a mess right now. It's a mess.
Is there anywhere in the world that one can flee to? Because this is like an often asked question. Is the entire world screwed, or is there could we find reprieve somewhere?
15 years ago, I just looked at relocating. Not that I was necessarily going to do it. I had a family at the time. Still had family. I was still one child under 18. I got a daughter going to college who, in her 20s. I don't want to leave. And I don't think they're going. They can't afford it. And, I never found it feasible. But I looked at it because you could see the problems. And that U.S. is going to be the epicenter of the worst parts of it, because we've got the dominant currency. And what happens when the dominant currency dies and the economic system dies? You have all this turnover and tribulation. All the tribulation around the world is essentially dating back to Bretton Woods and then 1971 to get the dollar off the gold, which caused mass inflation elsewhere, economic dislocation. Then we globalized. Now we're deglobalizing. The Japan debacle, the China debacle, all of these things since basically the 80s and 90s were the result of that dollar decision. I don't think if Nixon knew how badly this would screw up the world, that one decision, and then all decisions on the back of that, because the fiat currency started running and basically re-engineering the entire world trade from what it had been for hundreds of years. That's what we're seeing happen. And it's not affecting everybody the same. It's an issue, and we got to work through it. That's an issue. Is there a safe place to go? I don't know, man, because we all got fiat currencies. And how many countries have good gold backing? China. As an American, do you want to go live in China? I don't know if you get treated the same, or in Russia. Maybe you would, maybe you wouldn't. I don't know. Is that attractive to you? Are you going to go to Australia? I mean, I like Australia. It's a long way from home. I don't know that they're in any stronger position. I don't like China sitting right up north of them either. I mean, after Taiwan, China could come down to New Zealand and Australia and say, hey, thanks for all your resources. We need those for our war machine, or we need it for our economy. Do you feel safe going to India? Do you feel safe going to Europe? Do you feel safe going to South America? I don't know. There's a lot of expats all over the world. I see expats coming to the U.S. I see people moving to the U.S. from India, China, saying, I want opportunity here. So I don't know.
I think we've had like one of the largest inflows of millionaires across the entire world over the last year.
Yeah, they all want to come here, and all the gold's coming here because they think it's safe, which, I mean, it could be, but if our economy erupts, is it truly safe? Look at a few years ago, what we had happen during the election cycle, and you had riots in Portland, and, you had people shot, and people were throwing bricks in Dallas, breaking windows, and economic dislocation, all of these issues can occur everywhere. They can go anywhere. It's not limited to places that you don't live. And people think the grass is greener on the other side. And I'm like, well, go visit and find out. I recently, last year, went to the UK, Spain, and Turkey, and then in UAE in the Middle East. And they were like asking me, how do I get to the US? Some of the people there, very quietly. We had an episode on that. So I don't know. Where do you go?
Yeah, I mean, it looks like it's about to blow up there in the Middle East as well.
Yeah.
Going back to the economic side of things, you did have this comment from Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent yesterday saying that the economy is going through a detox period.
Yes.
Trump afterwards said that the economy is going through a transition period. Of course, these are nice little euphemisms used to describe most likely a recession. So what do you make of those comments? What are they getting us ready for? If they're willing to admit it's going to get bad, how bad is it going to get?
Okay. I've got a lot to say on this, and it may not make me super popular. I know people are married to Trump and his administration. I'm not against him. I'm an independent, have been my entire life since I was 18, walked into college and they said, do you want to be a Democrat and Republican? I said, give me a third choice. I've never registered as a blue or redder. And I've always been independent. I voted both parties. I've voted libertarian. I've stopped voting. You name it. I've tried it all, right? I don't marry a party. So I'm not for or against Trump. And I know that what he's doing with Doge and all that stuff looks good on its surface. Let's go back to his first administration. When FASB 56 was signed off on, and he knew about it as an administrative accounting rule, which meant the government can take dark its finances. Well, how they take it dark? Well, they can spend more than they say, and you can spend for housing and urban development in defense, or you can spend for defense in health. You never know what the government's spending money on. And there was $21 trillion of missing money from the Department of Defense and Housing and Urban Development found by the former assistant director of HUD.
Catherine Austin.
You would know Catherine Austin Fitts and also Dr. Mark Skidmore's PhD students. By the way, if you go to missingmoney.slaughter.com or you go to the Michigan State University website and you look at it, they've got the links. So I'm more worried about that missing 21 trillion. I think it's great that they're trying to find a few billion in Doge, or maybe even a trillion if we get lucky. That's what Musk says. What about the 21 trillion? What's going to make a bigger impact? Why don't you go after that? And why are the government finances still dark? What's going on here, I think, is not just they're trying to cost cut, and it's not just a panic. Yes, they're trying to make the public aware that things are going to get tough. And whenever they can do it now, think about the timing. Biden couldn't say it because the Democratic Party wanted a re-election. They needed to say things are going to be great. Once Trump comes in his first year, and on first day he's signing these orders, what he's going to do is use the first couple of years of his presidency to clean stuff out. But what people aren't paying attention to is that he's not cleaning everything out, is he? There's all this missing 21 trillion, which if you extend that to the rest of the government, some people think it could be 100 trillion.
If you're looking for great deals on gold and silver, coins and bars from a company that you can trust, then you've got to check out the good folks over at Pimbex. This year, I've really gotten to know these guys, and all I can say is you're not going to deal with a better group of people. They're a family-owned gold and silver online bullion company offering the essentials and more at industry-leading prices while always providing first-class top-tier service. That's PIMBEX.com. And if you're looking to convert some or all of your retirement account into real gold and silver, give Pimbex a call. They'll help explain the process and get you started on the right path. Your support at Pimbex also helps support the channel. So reach out to Pimbex today. You won't be disappointed. And make sure to tell them Danny sent you.
$100 trillion. Well, isn't that inflationary? Couldn't that collapse the dollar? What did we spend it on? Who did it go to? We've got those issues. So even if they clean out Doge, using Doge to clean out that, there's still all these cobwebs around the world, not just in the United States, around the world, been funded through this money printing. And essentially that's why the rest of the world's de-dollarizing. If we had not done that, if we had stayed on our normal course and not overprinted by trillions upon trillions of dollars, we may not be in the boat that we're in now. And I think Trump's trying to clean it up, but he's not cleaning it all up. And during his first administration is when they took that rule of FASB 56. Not saying he initiated it, but he knew about it. And I don't see them rescinding that or putting pressure. So what are they doing? Are they re-engineering? You've got Musk in here with his AI bots and his guys that we don't even know if they have clearance. Because I went through a security clearance once. I did a project. I was an auditor for 12 years. I was working with Ernst & Young. One of our clients was, I think it was EDS Systems, that had the federal student aid data on it. It was hosting. So it's like a third party, what's called an SSAE report, used to be called SAS 70. So you go and you bring an independent auditor in, they do one audit over this thing. And then since you have thousands of clients, they each use that report. So if you think about it, you had thousands of people using EDS systems because it's like a cloud hosting provider. So you do one report. So they brought EY in, we did it. I wrote the report. I did a lot of the testing. I had to get government security clearance. I went through hell. And this is just federal student aid. We're not talking about top secret. I'm getting military secrets. I went through absolute hell to get that approved. They went and interviewed my wife. They went and interviewed people I'd worked with 10 years ago. They interviewed every single neighbor in my neighborhood. There's 80 freaking people. They interviewed 80 people. This is a low-level security clearance. How did Elon Musk people on day one have that clearance when they're 20 years old and they're getting top secret clearance to Treasury data, which shows every single transaction that you've ever done on your bank account multiplied by 360 million people? What are they doing there? What are they installing? What are they doing? These are the questions we need to ask. Yes, is it good that they're cleaning stuff up? Yes. Is it good that they're finally warning the American people, understand that we're going to go through some rough times? But what else is going on behind the scenes? Those are critical questions that we need to ask. And are we actually solving our problems? If you only see the tip of the iceberg and you don't see what's going on below, then we need to see what's going on below. I'm an auditor. I will tell you, 99 times out of 100, you would go in to do an audit and you had an inkling what the top above water problems were. You know how many times I found worse stuff as I was going through my audit, and I wasn't even auditing that, but I got a piece of paper, I got something I looked at and said, hey boss, I need to go audit this. And I'd audit it and it would turn out to be some significant thing at least half the time. So what we're not seeing below the water is the real risk here. And we need to ask those questions. It's not saying that I'm questioning what Trump is or Elon or any of these guys are doing. I think they're doing a great job for what we see visually. But remember, the government took their finances dark on Trump's watch in that 2016, 2017 timeframe, first time he was president. He knows, there's no way the president does not know that the entire basically deep state, which by the way, beat him up for the last 8 years, has unlimited spending dollars. All the persecutions of Trump were paid for by dark money that we, and if you're concerned about Trump, you want to be concerned about that dark money. Well, why isn't he concerned? So is there a reengineering? My hypothesis, Trump knew that there were major issues last time. He wanted to save the buck. He wanted to save the dollar because he knew we would go through a Great Depression part 2, probably even worse than the first time, if it all came out, if all of it came out. So I think what they're trying to do is attack what they can. They're trying to hold down the fort. They're trying to re-engineer. And that's why on day one, he went nuts with all the stuff he's doing. He knows the problem's 100 times worse than they're letting us know. And that's what you guys need to know, that you're watching this. The problem is 100 to 1,000 times worse than he is telling you or anyone's telling you. It's 100 to 1,000 times worse than any YouTube influencer, analyst, talking head on CNBC is telling you. And that's what you need to know, because we're not seeing what's below the water, the top line. We're only seeing the top line. I guarantee you, 12 years in auditor, 8 years as a cyber analyst, in my master's, my concentration was digital forensics. I've done investigations for 20 years of different types. I'm telling you right now, it's 100 times worse. And so when you get a politician to admit it's bad, it's really bad. Yeah. And that's what we need to start paying attention to. And we need to ask critical questions. Don't assume that what's going on has solved the problem. We did not save the dollar. We're still trying to save the dollar. We're trying to spend our gold and spend our Bitcoin and save the dollar. And I don't even know if that's going to be enough. And so there's going to be fireworks the next 4 to 8 years. It's not only Trump's administration, the next one's going to have to deal with it. And how long does this last? And how bad is it going to be? We don't know. We don't see what's below the water. So it's good to talk about what's above the water. Let's start doing investigation on what's below the water. This is my auditor saying this is what we need to do.
Yeah, it's crisis management 101. You don't detail out the full scope of the disaster to the public to not elicit fear and panic. Because if it is as bad as we think it is, then could we see bank runs? Could we see chaos ensue?
We will see bank runs and bankruptcies. We had them a couple of years ago. We're going to get them again. It's coming.
Bail-ins,
bailouts, every kind of bail you can think of. They're going to do bank runs. They're going to close the banks. They may confiscate assets. You're going to have price controls. You're going to have financial controls. You're going to have a deep recession. You're going to have food lines. You're going to have people worried about their Social Security. At some point, this all has to blow up. I appreciate what the administration is doing. I do. I 100% appreciate it. They cannot solve it this way by itself. They're trying to control perception and do deeper things. My only question is, what are those deeper things and are they going to work? And history has told us no. When it gets to this level, debt to GDP, fiat money systems, 250-year nation state cycles, 80-year conjunctive wave cycles, no. But they may be buying us time. They may be trying to figure something. I think they're trying to buy time to figure out what the heck they're going to do. This cannot be the only plan. History says this is going to go bad if this is the only plan. So we need to do more.
Yeah, it sounds like if it does explode in their faces, then fast forward 4 years from now, do we risk seeing like the pendulum swing all the way back to the other side, and we get something along the lines of a socialist president or something like that? Or do we see one man rule? Does Trump become a dictator at that point?
In the history of great nation states, when they reach their 250-year cycle, where have they all gone? They've all gone to some form of tyranny, whether you want to call it left, right, up, down, whichever way from center you want to call it. It's tyranny. It's government control. It's government mandates. People going to prison. It's war. It's financial control. It's suppression of culture. It's all that. Do I know that the U.S. is going to that? No. Has it happened at every single time in history that the dominant nation state has reached the end of its 250-year cycle in recorded history? Every single time, no exception? Yeah. Are we going to be Pollyanna and say it couldn't happen in the U.S. because we're all supermen? We're all ordained by God to be the best nation in the history of the world and nothing backing up? No, I don't think so. I think we need to get over American exceptionalism and understand that we're in a crisis mode, and we all need to prepare for that. And we need to understand what history says happens in these cases. And we need to prepare for that, not just financially, but in every which way. We talked about that on your show before. People need to prepare, because when this stuff has happened before in history, every single time it's gotten rough.
Yeah. Yeah. What do you, I had John Palmy on the other day, and his thesis was he was trying to revisit the Reagan-Volcker plan by creating a recession to crush inflation.
Yes.
Do you think it could be something as simple as that? Could that just be the gambit here?
It could be, because in the tariffs and things like that's going to lead. Yeah. Oh, sorry to interrupt you. We had a look. I think my connection was slow and I didn't mean to interrupt you. Yes, because what they're doing is necessarily deflationary in terms of economic trade. They're trying to weaken the dollar at the same time. They're trying to stop spending a lot of money that was supporting the economy at the same time that they're using all of their available assets that have any value to back the dollar. This is not, yes, it could be that they're trying to do a smaller recession to stop the bigger one, stop the fail of the dollar. But even if they do, it's just kicking the can down the road. Mathematically, it's never existed in history that we got in this situation. We didn't have a major depression, collapse, crash, whatever you want to call it. And yes, I do think that could be part of the plan. And that's why I go back to that below the water iceberg comments. We don't know how bad it is. And that's why I don't want to criticize this administration. I don't want to criticize the executive branch or Congress or anybody right now, because I'm telling you, they know how bad the problem is. They know better than we do. And it's crisis mode. So I want to support them as much as possible. But the people need to understand, no matter what is coming out of these people's mouths, we need to understand it's worse. And we need to understand that maybe they're doing a short-term recession, and maybe they think that they can do that and kick it down the road another 5 to 10 years. And maybe they think that if we get into some more spending, that it'll boost our economy like it did World War II. I mean, those are all plans that they're probably thinking of because they've happened in the past. But what is shown in the past that will not work is the entirety of economic history in the world. When you get to these points, we're past the 1970s. You can't run the Volcker playbook now, because you have much more debt. You have the rest of the world saying, we don't want your currency. You have the rest of the world doing worldwide trade networks. You have everybody scrambling for gold. This is not the 1970s. It's not. And it's a different situation. So that playbook can push it down the road. It can alleviate some short-term pain. And the fact that they're doing it tells me we probably still are headed for a major recession. Because the way that, the first day he got in, he went nuts. It was like, executive order, more on the first day than any president in history. And he didn't, his first term, Trump didn't do as many as Obama or Biden. Now he's outpacing both of them put together. So that there's a change in posture the second time around. You could say it's because Trump.
There's a sense of urgency. Yeah.
Yeah. He's an emergency, save the ship. He's trying to save the Titanic. But unfortunately, I think it's a Titanic, right? Like, there's lifeboats, but is everybody getting out alive? I don't know. Economically speaking.
What's the rationale behind going after Greenland and Canada and Mexico? What's he trying to accomplish there? Is he trying to build a fortress America in North America? Is he trying to swallow up? Is he actually trying to swallow up Canada and Mexico here?
I think yes and no. He thinks best case scenario, he can swallow them up and get the resources. Canada has a ridiculous amount of physical resource, ridiculous amount, especially in the Arctic North. I mean, it is stupid how much they have. Greenland has a ton. And if you add Greenland, you're not adding that many people. I mean, it's basically like free resources at a cheap price, like Louisiana Purchase Part 2 or Alaska Purchase Part 2. It'd be great, wouldn't it? It'd be great to get all those resources for a real cheap price. Canada, Trump is basically, I think, using it more as posture because he's saying, we're paying for your military. You get more trade from us than we get from you. You're our 51st state. Does he really want Canada? I don't know. I think he's angling for a better trade deal. And that's why he's doing the rhetoric and the tariff at the same time. He's trying to get them to say, look, we are your economy. Without us, you're going to sink. So I'm going to use my bully power here to get you to give us a better deal so we can get the resources we need, because he needs cheaper energy and cheaper supplies and cheaper precious metals and cheaper rare earths. That's why the deal with Ukraine to get the rare earths. That's why Greenland to get the rare earths and the gold and silver and the oil and the natural gas and the metals. He knows we're going to have to rebuild after this recession. That's why his comments. Either he gets them to come on board with us, or he gets the deals he wants so that they can be the conduit and we can shove a bunch of money at them, which will help in the long run. So it's not just one way. It seems like that because he's the way he's doing it is very abrasive. Trump has this abrasive, I'm a business owner approach. But actually, it would be good for them to get in these new trade deals. In the short term, it may make a little bit less money, but we're their biggest trading partner in the case of Canada. And even in Mexico, we're huge. So it will help them in the long run. He's just, the way he's doing it's very abrasive. Now, the second part of your question, is it Fortress America? Well, think about this from an invasion perspective. Russia and China are playing around there in that little Arctic, right? Mm-hmm. How hard would it be for them to run a force down, and to take over Canada and come to the U.S.? There's a physical element to this. And the Arctic is being, it's kind of like the space race that nobody's talking about. They've had bases there for forever, and Russia and China got more. And Russia's got the Siberian route where they trade goods across that. They've been developing for 10 years. And they've got bases. And the U.S. bases, mostly we've had bases up there. They're mothballed. And then if you come across that Alaska corridor, that conduit, and also the conduit of terrorism coming up through Central America and Mexico, is very real. It's not just MS-13, it's terrorists from the Middle East. So you're talking about invading forces, current and possibly future. So there's a physical element to some of these things as well. So I think there's two elements, and Trump's not saying that, because if you went and said, look at all these Russian bases up here, and the Chinese and Russia could invade us through Canada and we couldn't stop it. I mean, you talk about tanking a market. You may have Black Friday. Right?
Yeah.
But I think that's an element to what he's talking about too. He's talking about kinetic issues as much as he's talking about economic ones.
It's very fascinating. What about the notion, and Martin Armstrong often brings up this point, is that Europe is in much worse shape than we are. And eventually all that capital, once Europe collapses, that capital is going to flow into most likely the United States. Yes. Won't that capital kind of provide a little padding, at least a little bit of a boost to?
That's what's happening in gold right now. And yes, you'll see that. And when I wrote my book, Drop Shadow, in 2009, I said it probably, the next recession, which I think will be a depression, starts either in Japan or Europe. And you're seeing it in Europe, and you're kind of seeing it in Japan too. The demographic issues are finally coming home to roost in Japan. They're having, the carry trade has been a sign of that. The problems with their currency has been a sign of it. Europe is in some places a dumpster fire, and it's trying to hold itself together. But you see this mass political sort of chaos and dislocation happening in Europe, which is a sign of people figuring out we're in a mess, and the politicos trying to control it and losing control. I don't care what the European political class tries to do. They've lost control of their people right now. You're seeing it in Romania. You're seeing it in some places in Germany. You're seeing it in a lot of places. So yes, and that will force business over to the U.S. And I also think that's why Trump's trying to position, because he's trying to position it to where we have I think he wants to use that opportunity to, I think he thinks it will lessen the recession and it will help us rebuild after the recession. Because he keeps talking about manufacturing. He keeps talking about make America great again, have America build stuff. So in his viewpoint, he wants America to be the epicenter of the recovery. So if he can force a smaller recession now to avoid the big one, take those capital flows, including the gold, and capitalize on that. That's his best play. Now, is that going to lead to touchdown and winning the Super Bowl? I don't know.
Hey, Rob, can you go back like 10 seconds?
Oh, yeah.
Like you cut off when you said, can Trump be the blank?
Yeah. So Trump is trying to use this to go into a recession, to lessen the chance for that accession to extend, to get the trade deals he needs to rebuild the U.S. Because what does Trump want to do? He wants to make America great again. And by doing that, it's through manufacturing. He talks about manufacturing. He talks about Americans making goods. He talks about us running our family farms. He understands that was a heyday of America. And he understands this globalization system that we had is falling apart, and he's trying to reconstruct it. Now, does that mean he wins? Does that mean we win the Super Bowl and America gets through a relative landscape? No, I don't think so. But it's his best play in his playbook. He's a coach of the team, and he's playing his best play. Now, is it going to be effective? I don't know. But he's trying to do what he can. Personally, I still think there's going to be a big crash. But, to his credit, it could mean that he's putting us in the best position. Now, the fact that a lot of it's dark money, I don't like. The fact that some of this appears to be a dog and pony show, I don't like. But I understand why he may be doing that from a public perception perspective. I only want to make sure that this ends up on the side of the American people and doesn't add to increased power. Because you just asked me the question before, what happens when countries crash? There's tyranny. We don't want this to lead to tyranny. So there needs to be enough honesty and transparency in the process so that people feel comfortable with where we're going. And I think there's a ton of uncertainty right now. There's a lot of uncertainty politically and culturally where we're going as a nation. And there's uncertainty economically. And that's what we're all just going to have to deal with the next few years. I don't think that's going away anytime soon. But I think Martin Armstrong makes a really good point. He's made a good point about the goal coming over because the NATO-Russia potential conflict. And, he's plugged into a lot of political leaders. So I think he makes a lot of good points here. But even all the points that we're all talking about, there's stuff under the water we don't know about. That it's the unknown unknowns. Donald Rumsfeld said it's the unknown unknowns that are going to get you.
Yeah. Now, given the recent developments between Trump and Putin and Zelensky, there does appear to be somewhat of a closening up between America and Russia.
Yes.
Now, couple this with what's going on in Greenland and Canada. How do you square that circle? How do you square the circle of we are getting closer to Russia, but at the same time, we're still concerned about our security by virtue of the North Pole, the Northwest Passage, and all the different passages across the North Pole that Russia has access to. Is this really just kabuki theater? Do we actually trust Russia? Are we actually getting closer to Russia? Or
I think you want to keep your enemies closer type of deal. He wants to be close. I think Trump thinks he can work with Putin. Putin said he would work with Trump. And I think Trump is trying to prevent an Armageddon scenario. And he's playing this very interestingly. He said, we're going to stop the Ukraine war and we're going to stop funding NATO, but he's trading supplies to Ukraine that NATO wants for rare earths and other trade. And Ukraine's also big on wheat, and it's like the harvest basket of Eastern Europe. It's where they grow a lot of their food. But at the same time, he's trying not to make Trump mad. He's trying not to make China mad. I think he's trying to play 3D chess now. Is he playing it right? I don't know. It's difficult. The U.S., because of all these treaties and economic agreements and the fact that we have the dominant currency still, even though it's waning, it's a very difficult position to be in. He doesn't have an easy job. You want to make sure you protect yourself from your enemy while at the same time making sure that you keep them as friendly as possible. And it's difficult. It is really a difficult thing. At the end of the day, is Trump worried about Russia? Yeah, I think he's more worried about China, if I'm being honest, because China's now developing their blue water navy. They've got the long range hypersonics.
Well, they did say I think Hexas was the one who said that we are moving our attention from Europe to the Pacific.
Yeah, and I think if you look at China and Russia's closer relation to Iran, who's nearly has a nuclear weapon, if reports are correct. North Korea, which we think may already have one, they're just developing the rocket technology, and China and Russia are helping them. There are trigger points at which we have to be careful. And I think that Trump knows that some of these other nations have these little roguelet sort of nations that could be used to trip off hot conflict. And so you got to be super careful. And I've been reading analysts for years that said if we do have a major conflict start, it's North Korea or it's Iran in Syria, either one. And who thought Ukraine, right? So we're not just dealing economic, we're dealing kinetic, and we have to be super careful. And I don't, they're never going to come out and tell us everything that they're thinking. Putin's not going to do it. China's not going to do it. The US is not going to do it. And I think that's why if you're following this whole saga, you got to follow a lot of people and you got to consider a lot of different angles. And it's a very complex game of chess. It's not as simple as people make it out to be. It's very super complex. And usually when you get into these types of complexities, it does lead to hot war. I hate to say it, but kinetic wars are a feature of this. It's cyber and economic, it's political, it's Cold War, and then you get into kinetic wars. And I just hope that we can all just be rational and keep the kinetic wars to a minimum as much as possible.
Totally. Well, hey, Rob, let's go back to Goldland here for a bit. We do have viewer questions from my Substack. First question from Leslie Scott. Her question is, will capital gains be charged on precious metals? There is this gray area, especially now that the IRS's legality is in question.
Well, I think precious metals right now are an asset. They're classified as an asset, not money. Now, there is a lot of gray area. Technically, you have to claim capital gains on it. That's statutory law. Constitutionally, it's money. And so what we've got going on right now, and why one of the reasons I'm board member on Citizens for Sound Money is our legislation is explicitly saying at the state level, because of Amendment 10, all powers now explicitly granted to Congress are given to the state and the people of the state. And because they're not explicitly granted through gold and silver, because Constitution still says gold and silver is money, we're trying to get the states to edify that so that you can't charge sales tax and capital gains tax, and you can use gold and silver as actual money because it's still in the Constitution, Article 1, Section 8, still there. They didn't get rid of it. And so the constitutional law should trump statutory law, but laws passed by the Congress are in some ways conflicting with the Constitution. So essentially what we're doing, there's now, I think Utah was the first state, seventh state to pass gold as legal tender, first state, and I think this happened Friday, through both houses of Congress. Now the governor just needs to sign off and it becomes official. But the first state to make electronic versions of gold money and to force the state to accept gold and silver in payment of debts and taxes. So now you're seeing the game upped. And we're in Florida, we're in Missouri, we're in North Carolina, we're in New Hampshire, we're in Texas. We've got 5 states, other grassroots in other states. So you start to see the people in the states saying, we see the fiat game coming to an end. Let's make gold and silver money again. Let's pass this legislation and push the way to get rid of capital gains taxes and sales. Now, are the federalists, the federal types, the not only the deep state, but that entrenched, federal bureaucracy, are they going to say, no, wait a minute, okay, yeah, we give up on our statutory law because the states, pass this edifying? No, it's going to set up a states' rights battle. And watch this battle. I've said for 2 years, what the states are doing is setting up a Supreme Court case of what is money. And will gold and silver win? Will the dollar win? Will it be Bitcoin? Because if you look at what we're doing in the Sovereign Wealth Fund, we're making Bitcoin, these other cryptos, a form of asset, which could eventually be what? Money. So even if you don't like CBDCs, and a lot of states are saying no to CBDCs, and I think somebody signed an executive order against CBDCs, I think it was Trump. So, but you can still use the private cryptos. So it's a war for money, essentially. And it's going to end up in a states' right and a people's rights battle for what is money. And it's going on right now. It's why it's so darn important. It's why we need to pay attention to this. People want to stack gold and silver. They don't want to go down their state capital and say, make it money again and get rid of capital gains and sales taxes. But that's the most important part. I don't care how much gold and silver you got. If it ain't money, you can't use it as money. And if they want to, confiscate it through taxation, which I think that's the way they're going to tax it and capital gains it, then what good is it if you're stacking right now? This is now the game. It's not just buying the gold and silver. It's getting the coverage to say, now I get my gold and silver the way I want it. And we don't get, put into this other system, which, by the way, those other monetary systems are more likely to lead to tyranny in the United States, not only around the world, than gold and silver. So it is the legislative fight that we have, and that capital gains and sales tax discussion and legal tender laws is so critically important to not only economic, but all freedom in the United States going forward, period, end of story. And it's the most important issue that we have right now, because as the money goes, so does culture and society, and as religion goes as well, or spirituality. But the money is a big factor of that. And that's, the money is the language of politics. And where you get your tyranny is politics. So we need to make sure that we have an honest money, a natural money, so that we have an honest political system, so that we don't lead into that tyranny. And that's why that's so important. And yeah, so the capital gains and the sales tax is huge. Is it clear? No. Are we trying to make it clear? Yes. For the exact point at which, if you're stacking, but you don't have the law on your side, it's not going to help you near as much as you think. It's not just about getting rich or having some silver to go buy bread. If you got capital gains on it, how do you do that? If you got sales tax, how do you do that?
Right.
Well, you can't. And the grocery store is going to report you. If the government says, I will shut down your bank account and your business if you do not fill out this IRS form every single time somebody presents you gold and silver, buys or sells it, they're going to do it. So this is the battle that we need to be in, not just understanding the problem, but grassroots effort, people calling, emailing, and showing up at their state capitol and saying, I want capital gains sales tax off of gold and silver, and I want gold and silver as legal tender again. I don't care how you do it, just do it. And that is pivotal to our political and cultural freedom going forward.
Yeah, it seems to be the only way to prepare for something like a bank bail-in, other than having like huge wads of cash laying around.
Yeah.
But yeah, how do people, how someone prepare for a bank bail-in or a bank run? Like, how close are we? I mean, a couple of years ago, we had that leaked video, or was it, I'm not sure if it was leaked or not, but there's a video of the FDIC, and they were basically saying that the banking industry was in dire straits, and the public knew. If only the public.
And we don't want to tell the public. Don't tell the public.
Only they knew how bad it really was. So how bad is it really now? If it was really that bad 2 or 3 years ago, how bad could it be today?
It's bad because if you look at what banks have on their books as assets, it's debt. And is debt an asset? No. In the stupid world of accounting, yes. In the real world, no. And here's the thing. Once interest rates go up, which they do when you have inflation and economic problems, where interest rates go up, it devalues the face value of that debt. It brings it down, and it collapses your balance sheet. The banks can't stop it. Here's why. They can put gold and silver and all that. Only the central banks have enough money to bring enough gold and silver in and to hold enough other central bank stock to remain solvent. But even they're worried, okay? The regular banking system cannot do this because all of their money through their loans gets produced out of thin air when somebody signs their John Hancock on a piece of paper. It says, I want that car, I want that house, I want a credit card to buy groceries. And so it's a debt-based system. The majority of the assets in the US banking system is debt. And once that collapses, down go the banks, okay? And that's where you got the bailouts last time. That's where you get the bailouts this time. Bail-ins, bailouts, bail everything's. If you look at Dodd-Frank, it's got all of the code words in it for bail-ins. So what does that mean? It means, oh, guess what? When you own a bank account, you're a beneficial owner. You don't actually own it. And all they have to use is either eminent domain or existing federal law to say, well, we need your $10,000 in cash. I'm going to give you this bank stock. And once they run out of money, what's that bank stock worth? You got an interest in a dying business. Who wants that to happen? That's codified into law right now. It's not something you have to pass. It's in law now. Same with your stockbroker account. Same with any financial instrument that you have. More than likely, you're subject to bail in, and they can take real value and give you, butt kiss for it, and it's legal. And then if you look at real estate, depending on where you are, and there's a big real estate collapse, you still got to pay your taxes. You still got to pay your mortgage, or they own it. Even if you own it free and clear, if you don't pay the taxes, they confiscate it. And they don't give you anything for it. They just take it. So if you owed, I have a friend that goes to county courthouses and does these auctions all the time. I used to do it when I was in real estate. I didn't buy any. I just went to understand it. And you go to the county courthouse, and they say, this person owes $10,000 in back taxes, and that property is worth $300,000. Who makes that money? The county will take their $10,000 plus their fees, and the investor buying it gets the difference between what they pay at the auction and what it's worth. Well, what happened to the person that owned the home and just couldn't pay their $10,000 in back taxes? They lost $300,000. So none of these papered assets are super safe, and gold and silver is safe, except for we need the law behind it to facilitate us actually using it. Okay. It's physically safe, but we need to actually be able to use it. And that's why I'm hammering on that end of the thing with a lot of my time and doing all this stuff is we need gold and silver to be money again to protect people when all this other stuff goes kaput. And what happens during recessions? All this other stuff goes kaput every single time.
Yeah. Well, I think we've covered a fair amount of topics here, Rob. Pretty much everything I had laid out. Anything else you want to talk about before we wrap up?
I would just say, everybody protect yourself. Stay tuned to this channel. I love this channel. You've got lots of different opinions. You put out a ton of content. Stay tuned to that channel. Come to mine every once in a while. Just be aware and be prepared. I always say first, be prepared spiritually, then be prepared physically with your food, water, money, all that kind of stuff. Make sure that you're living in a safe place. Make sure that you have close friends around that you can trust, and just know that we'll go through hard times. Hard times happen. If you prepare for them, you'll meet that challenge much better than if you're not. So the last thing anybody wants to do is just sit there on their couch and watch this video and not do anything. And also speak to other people, talk to your friends and family, try to help them as much as possible. That's what's going to get us through, is if society coalesces around each other. If society doesn't coalesce around each other, then it gets a little bit, a lot less fun. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. I appreciate the shout out here, Rob. Go ahead and plug your channel as well, and anything else you want to put down for the audience to check out.
Okay, a couple of things. Freedom Report on YouTube and Twitter. Just look up Freedom Report. I think I'm the only one there. You'll find me. Citizensforsoundmoney.org. We're doing a fundraiser right now to help with legislation. We spend over $100,000 every year just lobbying only in Florida, and we've got other states. We were also putting together some education and a TV show. By the way, that TV show will come out this summer. We're at least on one major cable channel. We think we may even go to a much bigger one. And then we've got a streaming package of about 1.5 billion people on the backside of that across the world. So we're literally going to reach millions and millions of people and millions of views. So go to Citizens for Sound Money if you're interested in that. We're raising money for that. That should come out this summer. We're already filming 2 more country locations to go, a couple more episodes to film, and we'll start putting in the can. And you'll see that come out this summer. So we'd appreciate the support, all the support we can get there as well.
Awesome. We'll have the links to all that down below. Guys, thank you so much for watching. Rob, thank you so much for coming on, my friend. As always, a great episode with you. If you enjoyed this episode as well, be sure to give us a like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss another one like this. Right, go, Rob, go in the comment section if you agreed with Rob's analysis. If you disagreed, do let me know. I do read the comments. And finally, check us out on Substack, capitalcosm.substack.com, to get early access to all of my videos. Also, ad-free version so you don't have to suffer through all the YouTube ads, and uncensored versions of all of my videos for the ones that warrant it. And also check out our good friends over at Pimbex. For all of your gold and silver needs, check out Pimbex. I've really gotten a chance to know these guys, and you're not going to find a better group out there. All right, guys. Until next time.